Josephine Maddox pressed her bleeding palm against the iron gate and whispered the only prayer she had left. "Please, just let me die somewhere warm." Behind her, Virginia City had already erased her name. Ahead, a ranch no housekeeper survived past 3 weeks. And somewhere between those two hells stood a man who hadn't spoken to another soul in 2 years. They said Nathaniel Thornwood buried his heart with his wife and daughter. They said he'd gone mad with grief. They were only half right. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Josie's story travels. And if you believe some broken souls are worth saving, hit subscribe and stay until the end. Now, let's find out what really happened behind those iron gates. The auction hammer fell on Josephine's wedding dress at 2:47 in the afternoon. She stood in her own parlor, wearing her dead husband's work shirt because they'd already taken everything else, and watched Mrs. Patterson hold up the cream-colored silk like a trophy. "Barely worn," the auctioneer announced. "Good as new." Someone in the crowd laughed. "Fitting. Marriage was barely real either." Josie's fingernails cut half moons into her palms. She didn't flinch. She'd stopped flinching 3 days ago when they'd dragged Samuel's body from the river, and the whole town learned exactly how much he'd lost at the gambling tables. Everything. He'd lost everything. And then he'd eaten his pistol rather than face her. Sold $3 to Mrs. Patterson. $3. Her wedding dress. Her mother had sewn that dress by candlelight, stitch by stitch, dreaming of a future her daughter would never have. The sheriff touched her elbow. "Mrs. Maddox, I think you should leave now. Leave and go where—" He didn't answer. Nobody answered. That was the point. Josie walked out of Virginia City with 17 cents a carpetbag held together by hope and spite, and her husband's Navy Colt hidden under her only spare dress. She didn't look back. The road to Wyoming Territory stretched like a threat across the Nevada desert. 4 days of walking. 2 days on a mail coach driven by a man who didn't ask questions when she paid him with the last of her coins, and a lie about meeting family. There was no family. There never had been, really. Just Samuel, who'd loved her desperately for 3 years before the gambling sickness took hold, and her mother dead when Josie was 17, and her stepfather, who'd made it clear she wasn't welcome the moment the funeral ended. By the time she reached Cutter's Bluff, Wyoming Territory, her boots had worn through at both heels. Blood stained her stockings, and the only thing keeping her upright was the stubborn knowledge that dying on the road would give Virginia City exactly what they wanted: the satisfaction of being right about her. Joe. Martha Holbrook was sweeping her boarding house porch when Josie limped into town. "Lord have mercy." The older woman set down her broom. "Child, you look like death warmed over and served cold." "I'm looking for work." Josie's voice came out rusty. She couldn't remember the last time she'd spoken. "I heard there's a ranch outside town needing a housekeeper." Martha's face changed, just slightly. A flicker of something pity-warning before her expression smoothed. "You mean the Thornwood place? If that's the one advertising—" "It's been advertising for 6 months. Nobody stays more than 3 weeks." Martha stepped closer. "What's your name, honey?" "Josephine Maddox, Josie." "And where are you coming from, Josie?" Josie met her eyes. "Somewhere I can't go back to. Does it matter?" The older woman studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed and reached out to touch Josie's arm. "Come inside. Get some food in you before you collapse. Then we'll talk about Nathaniel Thornwood and that ranch of his. I don't have money for—" "Did I ask for money?" Martha steered her toward the door. "Some things you do because they're right. Now come on before you fall down in my street and scare the horses." The stew was thin but hot. Josie ate 3 bowls before her hands stopped shaking. Martha sat across from her nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold, waiting. Finally, Josie pushed her bowl away. "Tell me about him. Thornwood." "What have you heard?" That he's cruel, that he doesn't speak, that he runs through housekeepers like water through a sieve. Martha snorted. He's not cruel, he's broken. There's a difference, though. I suppose the result looks the same from the outside. She wrapped her hands around her cup. Nate Thornwood used to be the finest man in this territory. Built that ranch from nothing. Built a house so beautiful you'd think it belonged in a painting. All for his wife Amelia. What happened to her? Died in childbed. The baby lived 5 days, then followed her mother. Martha's voice softened. That was 2 years ago. Nate hasn't set foot in town since the funeral. Hasn't spoken more than 5 words to anyone except the 3 ranch hands loyal enough to stay. And he's locked himself in that beautiful house like it's a tomb. Josie absorbed this. But he needs a housekeeper. The town council insisted. They were worried he'd die out there alone and nobody would know until the smell reached the road. Martha shook her head. So he put out the advertisement. But every woman who's gone out there has come back within a month, some within days. Why? Because it is like living with a ghost, they say. He doesn't talk, doesn't eat at regular hours, doesn't seem to notice you're there unless you touch something that belonged to her. Then, Martha paused. Then he notices. Has he hurt anyone? No, nothing like that. He just disappears. Goes so deep inside himself that you can shout his name and he won't hear you. The last girl said it was like watching a man drown in slow motion, and she couldn't bear it anymore. Josie thought about Samuel, about the way his eyes had gone empty in those final months, about how she'd watched him drown too and hadn't been able to save him. I'll take the job. Martha stared at her. Honey, did you hear what I just said? I heard. Josie stood her legs steadier now. But here's the thing, Mrs. Holbrook. I've got nowhere else to go. No money, no family, no reputation left to protect. That man's offering room board and wages for work I know how to do. She met the older woman's eyes. I can survive a ghost. I've been living with plenty of my own. The road to Thornwood Ranch wound north through grassland that should have been green, but had turned brown under the late summer sun. Josie walked it alone, carpet bag in hand, blood still seeping through her makeshift bandages, where blisters had worn to raw flesh. Martha had offered her a room for the night. Rest. Recovery. Josie had declined. If she stopped now, she might never start again. The gate appeared around a bend like something out of a fever dream. Black iron scrollwork, taller than a man standing open between 2 stone pillars. Beyond it, a road curved through neglected pasture toward a house that made Josie's breath catch. 2 stories, white clapboard, wraparound porch with decorative trim, gabled roof with windows that caught the afternoon light like watching eyes. It was the most beautiful house she'd ever seen. And it was dying. Paint peeled from the railings. Shutters hung crooked. Dead vines clutched the trellis like skeleton fingers refusing to let go. A rocking chair on the porch moved slightly in the wind, back and forth, as if an invisible woman still sat there, waiting for someone who would never come home. Josie walked through the gate. The front door was ajar. She knocked anyway. Mr. Thornwood, it's Josephine Maddox. I've come about the housekeeper position. Silence. She pushed the door wider. It creaked like a warning. Inside, every curtain was drawn. Every window shade pulled low. The air smelled of dust and abandonment, not rot, but absence. The smell of a place where nothing had been alive for too long. Mr. Thornwood. She stepped into the entry hall. Her eyes adjusted slowly. Polished wood floors covered in dust. A staircase curving upward. Wallpaper with roses faded and neglected. And everywhere gaps on the walls where paintings had once hung. Darker rectangles marking the ghosts of removed beauty. Footsteps. Josie froze. They came from deep in the house. Slow, heavy, deliberate. A man emerged from what she guessed was the kitchen, and when he saw her, he stopped dead. Nathaniel Thornwood looked nothing like the monster the town whispered about. He looked like a man who'd been fighting a war inside his own skin and losing. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair that needed cutting. Several days of stubble shadowing a jaw that might have been handsome before grief carved it hollow. His clothes were clean but rumpled shirt, untucked sleeves rolled to his elbows, like a man who'd given up on appearances but still remembered the motions. But it was his eyes that made Josie's heart stutter. Dark brown, deep as wells, and completely, utterly empty. "You shouldn't be here." His voice came out rough, like he'd forgotten how to use it. "I was hired." "No, you weren't. I put out that advertisement to shut up the town council. Nobody actually comes out here." He turned away. "Nobody stays." "I came, and I plan to stay." He stopped but didn't turn around. "Then you're either stupid or desperate." "Desperate!" Josie set her bag down. The thump echoed through the empty house. "Stupid ran out 3 states ago." That made him turn. His hollow eyes found hers, and for a moment something flickered in their depths. Curiosity. Recognition. "Who are you?" "I told you, Josephine Maddox. I answer to Josie." "I don't mean your name. I mean, who are you that you'd walk into this house knowing what everyone says about it?" Josie lifted her chin. "I'm a widow whose husband gambled away everything we owned and then killed himself, rather than face the consequences. I'm a woman who watched her own town auction off her wedding dress to pay debts that weren't legally mine. And I'm someone who walked 4 days to get here because there was nowhere else left to go." She stepped closer, ignoring the warning in his posture. "So you can stand there and tell me to leave, Mr. Thornwood. You can try to scare me off like you scared off the others. But I've got 17 cents to my name holes in my boots and absolutely nothing left to lose. Which means I'm staying whether you like it or not." The silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. From somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Josie hadn't realized there was a working clock. Somehow that felt important proof that time was still moving in this mausoleum, even if the man inside had tried to stop it. Finally, Nathaniel Thornwood spoke. "You got people who'll come looking for you?" "No. Nobody, no family, no friends who might worry." "Mr. Thornwood, if I disappeared tomorrow, the only people who'd notice would be glad I was gone." She met his eyes squarely. "That's rather the point of coming here." He absorbed that with a slow nod. Something shifted in his expression, not warmth, not welcome, but perhaps the first crack in a wall. "Upstairs. Second door on the left. It's clean enough." He turned away again. "I eat at sunrise and sundown. Don't talk to me unless the house is on fire." "Understood." "And Mrs. Maddox." She waited. "The door at the end of the hall. It stays locked. You don't touch it. You don't ask about it. You don't go near it, ever." Josie thought about the nursery Martha had mentioned, about a wife dead in childbirth, and a daughter who'd lived only 5 days. "I won't," she said quietly. He disappeared back into the darkness of the house. Josie picked up her bag and climbed the stairs, her bleeding feet leaving faint marks on the dusty steps. The room was exactly as he'd promised, clean, bare, impersonal as a hotel. A bed, a dresser, a window looking out over brown pastures that should have been golden. She unpacked her life into the bureau drawers. 3 dresses, 2 nightgowns, undergarments worn thin from washing. Her mother's copy of Wuthering Heights' Spine cracked from reading. A small wooden box containing her wedding ring, the one thing she couldn't wear and couldn't sell. And at the very bottom, wrapped in burlap, Samuel's Navy Colt. She put the gun in the bottom drawer under everything else. Probably wouldn't need it, but probably wasn't the same as certainly. Downstairs, she found the kitchen by following the smell of old coffee. It was worse than she'd expected. Dirty dishes piled in the dry sink, crusted with food days old. A pot on the stove containing something that might have been stew a week ago, but now looked like a breeding ground for disease. The pantry was nearly empty tinned goods and weevils, and not much else. Josie rolled up her sleeves. By the time full dark fell, she had the kitchen scrubbed clean, the dishes washed and put away, and a proper meal cooking on the stove. Nothing fancy: beans and salt pork cornbread made from supplies she'd found buried in the back of the pantry, coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of boiled leather. She set 2 places at the table, found a dinner bell hanging by the back door and rang it. Nothing. She rang it again. Still nothing. Josie walked through the dark house, following lamplight, to what turned out to be a study. Nathaniel sat behind a massive desk ledger open in front of him, but he wasn't writing. He was just staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something less damning. "Dinner's ready." "Not hungry." "When did you last eat?" "Don't recall." "Don't recall or don't care?" His jaw tightened. "Both." "Well, I went to considerable trouble to make that meal." Josie crossed her arms. "The least you can do is sit at your own table and eat it." He looked up then. Those empty eyes found hers, and she saw something flash through them: irritation. Surprise that she hadn't retreated. "Mrs. Maddox, I don't know what you're expecting from this arrangement, but I didn't hire you to mother me. I hired you to keep the house from collapsing. So keep the house and leave me alone." "You didn't hire me at all," she pointed out. "You told me to leave. I stayed anyway, which means we're making up the rules as we go." She held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "And my rule is this: if I cook, you eat. So you can get up and come to the table, or you can sit here and listen to me talk until you give in just to make me stop. I was married, Mr. Thornwood. I can be relentless when I choose." For a long moment she thought he'd refuse. Then slowly he closed the ledger and stood. He was taller than she'd realized. She watched something like surprise cross his face when she didn't step back. They walked to the kitchen in silence. Nathaniel sat where she indicated and stared at the plate she set in front of him like he'd forgotten what food was for. Josie poured coffee, served herself, and began eating without ceremony. After a long pause, he picked up his fork. They ate without speaking. The only sounds were cutlery against plates and the settling noises of an old house at night. Josie didn't try to force conversation. She'd learned in her own grief that sometimes silence was the only honest thing left. When he finished, and he did finish, Nathaniel pushed back from the table. "Thank you for the meal." It was the first fully civil thing he'd said to her. "You're welcome. Breakfast is at sunrise." He stood to leave. "Mr. Thornwood." He paused at the doorway. "I know you want to be left alone. I know you built this beautiful house in the middle of nowhere so nobody would bother you." Josie began gathering the plates. "But alone isn't the same as dead. And I won't work in a tomb. So you can eat with me, or you can eat by yourself. But either way, there will be food on this table twice a day. Real food. Hot food. The kind that reminds a person they're still breathing." She turned to the sink, dismissing him. After a moment, she heard his chair scrape back. His footsteps crossed the kitchen, paused at the doorway. "The locked room," he said, voice rough. "I meant what I said about it." "I know." "If you go in there, I won't." He left. Josie washed the dishes alone, staring out the window at the darkness beyond, and wondered what kind of ghosts a man kept behind a locked door, and whether they were any worse than the ones she'd brought with her. The next morning, Josie woke before dawn. Old habits. Samuel had kept unpredictable hours in those final months, stumbling home at 3 a.m., reeking of whiskey, or not coming home at all. She'd learned to sleep light and rise early. She dressed in her oldest work dress, wrapped her hair in a scarf, and went downstairs to see what she'd really gotten herself into. In daylight, the house showed its bones. Good bones. Solid construction. Every joint tight, every board level. This wasn't a house that had slowly declined. This was a house someone had actively stopped caring for. Someone who'd opened all the doors and windows and invited the dust inside because it didn't matter anymore. Someone who'd built something beautiful and then tried to let it die. Josie started with the parlor. She threw open the curtains and sunlight flooded in like water breaking through a dam. Dust motes swirled in the golden light. Furniture stood shrouded under covers like sleeping ghosts. A piano sat in one corner, lid closed, keys probably stiff from disuse. Above the fireplace, a darker rectangle where a portrait had once hung. She cleaned for 3 hours. Windows, floors, furniture. By the time she heard movement upstairs, the parlor looked like a room again instead of a crypt. She went to the kitchen and started breakfast. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, stopped dead, and stared at the food on the table. "You said sunrise." Josie pointed at a chair. "Sit." He sat. They ate in silence again. But this time she ventured a question. "How many head of cattle are you running?" He looked startled that she'd spoken. "About 400. Used to be triple that." "What happened?" "I stopped caring." He said it flat, matter of fact. "Sold off what I didn't need. Kept enough to maintain the land claim. That's all." "And the ranch hands?" "3. Used to be 20. His mouth twisted. "The 3 who stayed are the ones with nowhere better to go. Same as you." Josie let that pass. "Is it enough 3 men for 400 head?" "It's enough to keep them alive, and the fences standing. That's all I need." "Is it?" The question hung in the air between them. Nathaniel set down his fork, carefully, precisely, like he was setting down something much heavier. "Mrs. Maddox, I understand you have your own reasons for being here. I won't pry into them, but I'd appreciate the same courtesy. This is my ranch, my business, my life or what's left of it." His eyes met hers. "You're here to keep house. So keep house. But don't start thinking you're here to fix me. I'm not a project." "No," Josie agreed. "You're a man who built a beautiful home for a family that's gone, and now you're letting it die because they did." She stood carrying the plates to the sink. "That's not a project, Mr. Thornwood. That's just sad." She didn't see him for the rest of the day, but that night when she left dinner on the table and went to bed, she heard the creak of stairs sometime past midnight. In the morning, the plate was empty. Washed. Put away. Small victories. Josie made breakfast anyway, and when Nathaniel came down, he sat without being told. Progress. On the 5th day, everything changed. She was cleaning out a drawer in the parlor when she found it. A music box wrapped in a faded baby blanket. She opened it without thinking. A lullaby began to play soft, sweet heartbreaking in the silence of the abandoned house. "What are you doing?" Josie spun. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, and for the first time since she'd arrived, his face showed something besides emptiness. Fury. "I was cleaning. I didn't know. Give it to me." He crossed the room in 3 strides and took the music box from her hands. The lullaby cut off mid-note when he snapped it shut. "I told you not to touch things. You said the locked room. This was in a drawer. It shouldn't have been." His jaw worked tendons standing out in his neck. "Everything that was there should be locked away. How did this—" He stopped himself, took a breath that shook on the exhale. "Just don't touch things that aren't yours." "Mr. Thornwood," Josie kept her voice gentle. "I'm cleaning your house. That means I'm going to find things. I didn't mean to cause you pain." "Well, you did." He turned away, the music box clutched in one hand, the blanket trailing from it like a flag of surrender. "Stay out of the parlor. Clean the kitchen. Clean the bedrooms. I don't care. But stay out of here." He left, taking the music box with him. Josie heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard a door open and close. The locked room. She stood alone in this parlor, surrounded by furniture she'd uncovered, and floors she'd scrubbed, and windows she'd washed to let the light back in. And she understood with sudden terrible clarity what she was really doing here. This wasn't just cleaning. This was excavation. Every room she touched was removing another layer of protective dust from wounds that had never healed. And Nathaniel Thornwood didn't want to heal. He wanted to stay buried. That night he didn't come to dinner. Josie left the food out anyway, climbed the stairs, stopped in front of the locked door. "Mr. Thornwood, I left dinner in the kitchen. Please eat something." Silence. "I'm sorry about the music box. I truly didn't mean to." "Go away." His voice came through the wood raw and ragged. "I understand more than you think I do. about things that hurt too much to touch. Josie pressed her palm flat against the door. But starving yourself won't bring them back. It'll just leave you too weak to remember them properly. No response. She went back downstairs, ate alone, washed the dishes. Sometime past midnight, she heard him moving through the house. In the morning, the food was gone. The plate was washed, and on the kitchen table, placed precisely where she'd find it, was a single wildflower. The first living thing she'd seen in this house besides dust and grief. Josie picked it up and held it to the light. Maybe buried wasn't the same as dead, after all. The wildflower sat in a chipped cup on Josie's windowsill for 3 days before it wilted. She didn't throw it away. Couldn't bring herself to. Instead, she pressed it between the pages of her mother's copy of Wuthering Heights and tried not to think too hard about what it meant. A man who hadn't spoken more than 10 words at a time had left her a flower. A man drowning in grief had noticed she existed. It wasn't much. But in a house full of ghosts, it felt like everything. The days settled into rhythm after that. Josie woke before dawn, made breakfast, cleaned one room thoroughly, made dinner, and tried not to notice how Nathaniel appeared only for meals before vanishing back into his shadows. But something had shifted. The silences between them felt different now, less hostile, more like two people learning to share space without stepping on each other's wounds. On the 7th morning, she came downstairs to find him already in the kitchen. He was standing at the window, coffee cup in hand, watching the sun rise over the brown pastures. He didn't turn when she entered, but his shoulders tensed slightly, acknowledging her presence. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." Josie moved to the stove, began preparing breakfast. Bad dreams. No dreams at all. That's worse somehow. He took a long drink of coffee. "When I dream, at least I see her face. When I don't, it's like she never existed." It was the most he'd said about his wife since she'd arrived. Josie cracked eggs into a bowl, giving him the gift of not looking at him while he spoke. What was she like? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. "Stubborn," he said finally. "Fierce, had opinions about everything and wasn't afraid to share them. Laughed too loud for polite company and didn't give a damn who disapproved." His voice roughened. "She was from back east, Boston. Her father was a merchant, wanted her to marry money and social standing. Instead, she ran off with a carpenter's son who had nothing but a dream about building something out west." "She sounds remarkable." She was. He turned from the window then, and Josie saw his face clearly in the morning light. The hollowness was still there, but underneath it, something else flickered. Memory, pain, love that hadn't died even when everything else had. "She would have liked you, I think. You've got the same stubborn streak, the same refusal to quit when any sensible person would run." Josie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm not sure that's a compliment." "It is." He set his cup down on the counter. "Highest one I can give." They ate breakfast together, and for the first time the silence felt comfortable instead of strained. When he finished, Nathaniel didn't immediately disappear. Instead, he lingered at the table watching her clear the dishes. "I'm riding out to check the fence line today," he said. "Should be back by sundown." "All right. If you need anything while I'm gone, Zeke and the others are in the bunkhouse. They'll help." Josie turned from the sink, surprised. "You're telling me this, why?" "Because you're alone out here. And because—" He stopped, jaw working. "Because I shouldn't have left you alone this whole time without telling you where the help was. That wasn't right." "Mr. Thornwood?" "Nate." He said it quietly. "My name is Nate. Nathaniel was what my mother called me when I was in trouble." "Nate." She tested the name. It fit him better, shorter, rougher, more honest. "I'm Josie. Not Mrs. Maddox, not ma'am, just Josie." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. "Josie, then." He grabbed his hat from the hook by the door. "I'll be back for dinner. I'll have it ready." He paused at the threshold. "Josie." "Yes. Thank you for not giving up on this place." He put his hat on, pulling the brim low. For not giving up on me. He was gone before she could respond. Josie stood at the sink for a long time afterward, hands still wet, heart doing something complicated in her chest that she wasn't ready to name. The afternoon brought visitors. Josie was beating rugs on the clothesline when she heard hoofbeats approaching. 3 riders came up the road, and for a moment her hand drifted toward the pocket where she'd started keeping Samuel's pistol. But these weren't strangers. These were Nate's men. The oldest one dismounted, first-weathered, gray-haired with kind eyes, set deep in a face that had seen too much sun and too much sorrow. He touched his hat brim. "Ma'am, I'm Ezekiel Moreno. Folks call me Zeke." He gestured to the others. "This here's Silas Pike and Tommy Reeves. We work the ranch." "I've heard about you." Josie set down her rug beater. "Mr. Thornwood, Nate mentioned you this morning." The 3 men exchanged glances. Zeke's eyebrows rose. "He mentioned us by name. Said I should come to you if I needed anything while he was riding fence. Well, I'll be damned." The youngest one, Tommy, grinned broadly. Red hair freckles, couldn't have been more than 22. "Pardon my language, ma'am, but that's the most words the boss has said about anything in near 2 years. "Tommy." Pike's voice was low warning. He had a scar running from his ear to his jaw, and he spoke like a man who'd learned to choose words carefully. "Mind your manners." "It's all right." Josie smiled slightly. "I've noticed he's not much for conversation." "Used to be." Zeke's voice was soft with memory. "Before Mrs. Thornwood passed, you couldn't shut that man up. Had a joke for everything. A plan for everything. Used to sit on that porch with his wife every evening talking and laughing until the stars came out." He shook his head. "Then the sickness took her and the baby, and it was like someone blew out a candle. Just gone." Josie thought about the music box, the faded blanket, the wildflower on her windowsill. "Maybe not gone," she said quietly. "Maybe just buried." Zeke studied her for a long moment. "You might be right about that, ma'am. You just might be." They'd come to check on her, she learned. To make sure she had everything she needed. To introduce themselves properly, now that it seemed she might actually stay. The others didn't last long enough for introductions, Tommy admitted. One lady took one look at the boss's face and turned right around. Didn't even unpack her bag. "His face isn't that frightening." "No, ma'am, but his grief is." Pike said it matter-of-factly. "Most folks can't stand to look at that much pain. Makes them uncomfortable. Makes them remember their own losses." "And you 3?" Josie asked. "Why did you stay?" The men exchanged glances again. Some unspoken communication passed between them. "Because he gave us a chance when no one else would," Zeke said finally. "Each of us for our own reasons. And we figure we owe it to him to stick around until he finds his way back." "Or until he doesn't," Pike added grimly. "Either way, we're here." After they left, Josie stood in the yard, watching their dust trail disappear toward the distant bunkhouse. 3 men. 3 loyalties. 3 people who'd chosen to stay when the world expected them to leave. Maybe that was the secret. Maybe that was how you survived the unsurvivable. You found your people. And you held on. Nate returned at sunset, dusty and tired, but something different in his bearing. He'd been working. Really working for the first time in months, maybe. It showed in the way he moved, purposeful physical present in his own body instead of floating somewhere outside it. "Fence line's holding," he reported, hanging his hat. "But we'll need new posts before winter, and wire. The old stuff is rusting through. I'll add it to the supply list." Josie set his plate on the table. "Your men stopped by this afternoon." He paused halfway to his chair. "They did. Wanted to introduce themselves. Make sure I had everything I needed. That was good of them." He sat, looked at the food, roasted chicken tonight with potatoes and the last of the summer vegetables she'd found in the neglected garden. This looks real good, Josie." "It's just chicken." "It's more than that." He met her eyes. "It's someone caring enough to make it." They ate in easier silence than before. When he finished, Nate didn't immediately retreat. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, coffee cup cradled in his hands, and watched her clear the table. "Can I ask you something?" Josie's hands stilled on the plates. "Depends on what it is." "Your husband, the one who gambled everything away." His voice was careful, like he was handling something fragile. "Did you love him?" The question hit her like a fist to the chest. She hadn't expected it, hadn't prepared a defense. "I did," she said finally. "In the beginning, when he was still himself. When the gambling was just a game, he played sometimes, not a sickness that ate him alive." She carried the plates to the sink, giving herself something to do with her hands. "By the end, I'm not sure what I felt. Pity, maybe. Exhaustion. This desperate hope that the man I married would come back." "Did he?" "No. He just kept drowning, and I kept trying to save him, and we both went under together." Josie stared out the window at the darkening sky. "When they found his body in the river, part of me was relieved. Isn't that terrible? Part of me was glad it was finally over." "That's not terrible." Nate's voice was closer. She hadn't heard him move, but suddenly he was standing beside her, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "That's human. You can love someone and still be relieved when their suffering ends. Even if it means yours is just beginning." "Is that how it was with your wife?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No. With Amelia there was no relief. Just absence. One moment she was there fighting to bring our daughter into the world, and the next she was gone. Like God reached down and just took her. No warning, no goodbye. Just empty space where she used to be." "And your daughter?" "Lily." He said the name like a prayer. "She lived 5 days. 5 days of me holding her, feeding her with a rag soaked in sugar water, praying to every god I could name. And then she was gone too, and I had to dig 2 graves on that hill instead of 1. Josie turned to face him. His eyes were wet, but no tears fell. She wondered if he'd cried at all in 2 years, or if he'd locked that away too, behind all those closed doors. "I'm sorry," she said. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough. But it was all she had. "I know." He reached out, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he was going to touch her face. Instead, his hand landed on her shoulder, gentle, tentative. "Thank you for asking. Nobody asks anymore. They're all too afraid of the answer. I'm not afraid of grief, Nate. I've got plenty of my own." "I know." That almost smile again. "That's why you're still here." He stepped back, and the moment passed. But something had opened between them. A door, maybe. A window. Some small crack in the walls they'd both built. "Good night, Josie." "Good night, Nate." She listened to his footsteps climb the stairs, heard him pause outside the locked door, then move on to his own room. Progress. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The house began to transform under Josie's hands. She attacked the neglect room by room scrubbing and polishing and coaxing life back into spaces that had been dead for 2 years. Nate watched her work sometimes from doorways and corners, not offering to help, but not stopping her either. Then one morning she found him on the front porch with a hammer. "Step's broken," he said without looking up. "Should have fixed it months ago. Didn't want you breaking your neck." Josie hid her smile behind her coffee cup. "That's thoughtful of you." "Practical. If you break your neck, I'd have to cook my own dinner again." "Heaven forbid." He glanced up then, and there it was, that ghost of humor she'd glimpsed before, buried but not gone. "You've got a smart mouth, you know that." "I've been told." They worked side by side that morning. Nate on the porch repairs Josie on the windows. It felt domestic, normal, like a life instead of a penance. Around noon, a rider appeared on the road. Nate's whole body changed. He set down his hammer, straightened, and his face went from almost warm to stone cold in the space of a breath. "Get inside," he said quietly. "What? Why?" "Just do it." But Josie didn't move. She recognized that kind of tension, had seen it in Samuel when the bill collectors came, had felt it in her own bones when the auction started. The rider was expensively dressed, too expensively for ranch country. Tailored coat, polished boots, a hat with a silver band that probably cost more than everything Josie owned. He was in his 50s, handsome in a sharp-edged way with pale blue eyes that assessed the property like a buyer at a livestock sale. Thornwood. The man stopped his horse at the gate but didn't dismount. Been a while? Not long enough, Whitfield. Whitfield. Josie remembered Martha mentioning that name. Cornelius Whitfield, the man who owned half the territory and wanted the other half. Now that's not friendly. Whitfield's smile didn't reach his eyes. I heard you finally got yourself some help. Wanted to come by and see for myself. His gaze slid to Josie, and she felt it like oil on her skin. This the new housekeeper? That's none of your concern. Everything in this territory is my concern. Whitfield's horse shifted restlessly, and he controlled it with one careless hand. She's prettier than the last few. Younger, too. Wonder how long this one will last. Nate stepped forward, putting himself between Josie and the man on the horse. State your business or leave. My business is simple. I'm prepared to make you an offer on this land. A generous one. More than generous, actually enough to set you up comfortable somewhere else. Somewhere without so many memories. I'm not selling. You should reconsider. Whitfield leaned forward in his saddle. This ranch is wasted on a man alone. A man who's given up. I could do something with this land. Run 1,000 head. Employ 20 men. Make it productive again instead of a monument to a dead wife. Josie saw Nate's hands curl into fists. Saw the muscle jump in his jaw. And before she could stop herself, she was moving, stepping around him, walking toward the gate. Mr. Whitfield? Her voice came out steady, clear, stronger than she felt. You're on private property. Mr. Thornwood has declined your offer. I suggest you respect his answer. Whitfield's eyebrows rose. He looked at her, really looked, and whatever he saw made his smile sharpen. Well, well, the housekeeper has teeth. He dismounted with the ease of a man used to being in charge and walked toward her. Nate moved to intercept, but Josie held her ground. What's your name, sweetheart? Mrs. Maddox. And I'm not your sweetheart. Mrs. Maddox. He said it like he was filing it away. Widow, I'm guessing from the look of you. No ring, no prospects. Come all the way out here to keep house for a man who's half mad with grief. His eyes glittered. Tell me, Mrs. Maddox, what's a woman like you really doing in a place like this? Surviving. Josie didn't flinch. Same as everyone else. Surviving. He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Yes, I suppose that's one word for it. Another word might be opportunist, or gold digger, or... That's enough. Nate's voice cracked like a whip. He was beside Josie now, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You've said your piece, Whitfield. Now get off my land. The two men stared at each other. Something passed between them. History, hatred, something Josie didn't understand, but could feel like electricity in the air. Finally, Whitfield stepped back. I'll leave, for now. But think about my offer, Thornwood. Think hard. His eyes slid to Josie one more time. Because one way or another, I'm going to get what I want. I always do. He mounted his horse, wheeled it around, and rode back down the road without looking back. Nate didn't move until the dust had settled. Then his shoulders sagged, and he turned to Josie with something like awe in his expression. You shouldn't have done that. Done what? Told him to leave. Stood up to him, made yourself a target. His voice was rough. Cord Whitfield isn't a man you want noticing you. He's been trying to get this land for years. Ever since... He stopped, swallowed. Ever since Amelia turned down his proposal to marry me instead. The words landed like stones in still water. He proposed to your wife, before she was my wife, before she was anything to me. She was the prettiest girl in Cheyenne, and Whitfield decided he wanted her the way he wants everything as a possession. She told him no. Told him she'd rather marry a penniless carpenter than a rich man with a dead heart. Nate's jaw tightened. He's never forgiven her for it. Or me. So this isn't just about land. It's never just about land, not with him. He looked toward the road where Whitfield had disappeared. He wants to take everything I built with her, wants to tear it down and make something of his own on top of the rubble. It's about proving she was wrong to choose me. Josie felt cold despite the afternoon sun. What will he do now? I don't know. Pressure, threats, legal games. He's patient, I'll give him that. He'll wait until I'm weak, until I'm desperate, and then he'll move. Nate turned back to her. Which is why you should leave, before you get caught up in whatever he's planning. Leave and go where? Anywhere. I can pay you what I owe, give you enough to get started somewhere else. Nate. She cut him off. I've already been run out of one town by people who wanted to see me destroyed. I'm not running again. This is different. Whitfield is dangerous. So am I. She said it simply, truthfully. I survived my husband's death, the auction of everything I owned, and a 4-day walk across the desert. I survived Virginia City's judgment, and my own grief, and every moment I thought about giving up, but didn't. She met his eyes. Cornelius Whitfield doesn't scare me. Bullies never do. It's the quiet destruction that gets you the slow rot from inside. He's just loud noise. Nate stared at her, and then unexpectedly he laughed. It was rusty, unpracticed, like a door that hadn't been opened in too long. But it was real. God, you're stubborn. I've been told. Amelia would have loved you. He said it without thinking, then stopped, something flickering across his face. But he didn't take it back. She really would have. That night over dinner they talked about Whitfield, about his empire, about the ranches he'd acquired through pressure and manipulation, about the way he'd slowly surrounded the Thornwood property over the past decade, buying up everything around it, cutting off access to markets and supplies. He's been playing a long game, Nate said, waiting for me to fail. And for 2 years I've been helping him by letting this place fall apart. So stop helping him. He looked up sharply. What? Stop letting it fall apart. Stop hiding in this house like a ghost. Stop giving him exactly what he wants. Josie leaned forward. You built this ranch, Nate. You built this house. Your wife helped you dream it into existence. Are you really going to let a man like Whitfield take it just because you're too tired to fight? It's not that simple. Yes, it is. She cut him off. Either you fight or you don't. Either you live or you keep pretending to be dead. There's no middle ground anymore. Whitfield made sure of that today. The silence stretched between them. Josie could see him wrestling with it, the exhaustion, the grief, the weight of 2 years of surrender. Then something shifted in his face. A hardening. A decision. You're right. He said it quietly. God help me, you're right. So what are we going to do? He looked at her, then really looked, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Not emptiness anymore, something fiercer, something alive. We're going to fight, he said, together. That single word together settled into Josie's chest and took root. She wasn't alone anymore. Neither was he. And whatever Cornelius Whitfield was planning, he was going to find out that broken people were the most dangerous kind. Because they'd already lost everything. Which meant they had nothing left to fear. End Part 2. Part 3. Louis Viet năm tư liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Kể theo ngôi thứ ba, giữ độ kịch tính, không viết lần man kết thúc phần, không giới thiệu phần sau. Lui chaloy chong muk tin yun, không nhé sang muk document 11, Badiwa, Part 3. The decision to fight changed everything. Josie saw it first in the way Nate moved, no longer drifting through his own house like a ghost, but walking with purpose, shoulders back, jaw set. He started riding out with Zeke and the others every morning, checking fence lines and counting cattle, and making lists of what needed repairing. He came home dirty and exhausted, and more alive than she'd seen him since she arrived. On the third day after Whitfield's visit, Nate called a meeting. They gathered in the kitchen, Josie, Zeke, Pike, and Tommy, sitting around the table while Nate stood at the head, looking more like a leader than a haunted man. "I owe you all an apology," he said. "For 2 years I've been letting this ranch die, letting you carry a burden that should have been mine. That ends now." Zeke shifted in his chair. "Boss, we understood. After what happened doesn't excuse what I did afterward." Nate's voice was steady. "Amelia wouldn't have wanted this. She didn't help me build this place just so I could let it rot." He looked at each of them in turn. "Whitfield came by a few days ago, made his usual offer. I turned him down, but we all know he won't stop there." "What's he planning?" Pike asked. "Don't know yet, but I intend to find out." Nate pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. "This is a list of everything that needs doing before winter. Fence repairs, barn work, new stock. I want this ranch running at full capacity by spring." Tommy whistled low. "That's a lot of work for 4 hands." "Then we'll hire more. Pay's been tight, but I've got savings I haven't touched. Time to use them." Nate looked at Josie. "Mrs. Maddox has agreed to manage the household accounts, keep track of what we spend, what we need." The men glanced at her with new respect. She hadn't expected Nate to give her authority in front of his crew. "One more thing." Nate's expression hardened. "Whitfield's going to try something. I don't know what or when, but he will. So we watch, we document, and we don't give him a single opening to exploit." After the meeting, Josie found herself alone with Nate in the kitchen. The others had dispersed to their tasks, leaving behind the echo of hope and determination. "That was quite a speech," she said. "Meant every word." "I know you did." She began gathering cups. "What made you decide really?" Nate was quiet for a moment. Then he moved to stand beside her at the sink. "You did." He said it simply. "Watching you fight every day. Watching you refuse to give up on this place on me when anyone else would have run." He turned to face her. "You made me remember what it felt like to want something again." Josie's heart stuttered. "Nate, I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable." His voice was rough. "I'm saying it because it's true, and because you deserve to know that you matter, that what you've done here matters." She met his eyes, saw the gratitude there and something deeper, something neither of them was ready to name. "I didn't do anything special," she said quietly. "I just refused to let you drown." "That's everything, Josie. That's everything." The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks later. Tommy rode in at a gallop horse, lathered and wild-eyed. "Fence is down north pasture. Someone cut the wire, 30 head scattered." Nate was on his horse within minutes, Josie watching from the porch as all 4 men rode out toward the damage. She paced the kitchen for hours, unable to focus on anything but the sick feeling in her gut. They returned at sunset, exhausted and grim. "Clean cuts," Zeke reported. "Not weather damage. Not wear. Someone took wire cutters to that fence deliberately." "How many did we lose?" "Recovered most of them, but 12 head wandered onto Whitfield's land." Pike's scar stood out white against his anger-flushed face. "His men found them this afternoon. Claim they're mixed in with his herd now. Can't sort them out." "Can't or won't? Does it matter?" Nate's hands clenched on the table. Josie watched the anger build in him, saw the effort it took to control it. "We document everything," he said finally. "Date damage losses. I want records." "For what?" Tommy asked. "For when we need them." The second attack came a week after the first. Josie woke to the smell of smoke. She was out of bed and running before her mind caught up with her body, bare feet pounding down the stairs, heart hammering against her ribs. Through the front window, she saw orange light dancing against the darkness. The barn. She burst onto the porch screaming Nate's name. He was already there, already running toward the flames with Zeke and Pike right behind him. Tommy sprinted past her with buckets and without thinking, Josie joined the chain. Water from the pump to the fire line. Bucket after bucket. Her arms burned, her lungs burned. Smoke stung her eyes until she could barely see. But she kept hauling, kept passing, kept fighting alongside men who'd become family without her noticing. It took 3 hours to contain the blaze. When it was over, they stood in the yard, soot-covered and shaking. The barn's east wall was charred black. The hay storage was gutted. But the structure stood, and the horses inside had been saved. "How did it start?" Josie's voice came out hoarse. Pike held up a blackened lantern, its glass shattered. "Found this in the hay. Kerosene. Deliberate." Nate didn't speak. He stood staring at the ruined barn, his face unreadable in the pre-dawn light. Then he turned, and Josie saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Not defeat. Rage. "He wants to play this game," Nate said quietly. "Fine. We'll play." "Nate." Josie caught his arm. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to stop being defensive." He looked at her, and the ghost she'd first met was completely gone. In his place stood a man forged by loss and hardened by anger. "Whitfield's been circling this property for years. He's got legal claims on 3 sides of me, land he bought cheap from people he squeezed out the same way he's trying to squeeze me. So there's got to be a record, a pattern, something I can use." He started toward the house. "I'm riding to town tomorrow. Going to talk to the land office, see what I can find." "I'll go with you." He stopped, turned. "Josie, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She stepped closer. "You said we're in this together. That means together. Not you fighting alone while I wait at home wringing my hands." For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then something softened in his face. "All right, together then." They rode into Cutter's Bluff the next morning. It was Josie's first time back since she'd arrived at the ranch, and she felt the weight of stairs as they rode down the main street. Whispers followed them like dust about the widow from Virginia City, about the grieving rancher who'd finally emerged from his self-imposed exile. Let them talk. She was done caring what people said. The land office was the small building near the town hall, staffed by a nervous clerk named Henderson, who kept glancing at Nate like he expected him to start breaking furniture. "Mr. Thornwood?" Henderson's voice cracked. "What can I do for you?" "I need records. Every land transfer in this territory involving Cornelius Whitfield. Last 10 years. That's a lot of records, sir." "Then you'd better get started." It took 3 hours. Henderson pulled files while Josie organized them, and Nate read through deed after deed, his expression growing darker with each one. "Look at this," he said finally. "The Morrison Ranch, sold to Whitfield for $200. Josie leaned over his shoulder. "That land is worth thousands." Was worth thousands, until their barn burned down, until their cattle got scattered, until they couldn't afford to hold on anymore. He pulled another file. The Carter place, same pattern. Fire fence cutting mysterious accidents, sold for pennies on the dollar. He's done this before. He's done this 6 times that I can find. Nate's jaw was tight. 6 families destroyed so Whitfield could expand his empire, and nobody stopped him because nobody could prove anything. Josie stared at the pile of records. The evidence was circumstantial patterns, not proof, but it was something. "Can we use this?" "Maybe." Nate gathered the papers. "I'm going to talk to a lawyer in Cheyenne. See if there's enough here for an investigation." They were leaving the land office when Whitfield stepped out of the saloon across the street. He saw them immediately. His face split into a smile that didn't reach his cold blue eyes. "Thornwood, what a pleasant surprise." He crossed the dusty street with the confidence of a man who owned everything around him. And the lovely Mrs. Maddox. Still playing house, I see. Still harassing people who won't sell to you, I see. Josie kept her voice level. We know about the Morrisons, the Carters, all of them. Something flickered in Whitfield's eyes, surprise quickly hidden. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Nate stepped forward. I think you've been running the same game for years. Pressure accidents, desperation, buy low profit high. He held up the folder of documents. I'm going to prove it. Whitfield's smile didn't waver, but his voice went cold. Be very careful, Thornwood. Making accusations you can't support is dangerous. So is burning a man's barn while his housekeeper sleeps inside. Silence. The two men stood inches apart, hatred crackling between them like lightning. I don't know anything about a fire, Whitfield said finally. But I do know this: you're alone out there, Thornwood. 3 hands and a widow woman against the biggest operation in the territory. How long do you think you can hold out? Long enough. We'll see. Whitfield's eyes slid to Josie. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Maddox. Lonely roads at night can be dangerous for a woman alone. He walked away before either of them could respond. Josie's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists, willing the trembling to stop. He threatened me. I know. Nate's voice was deadly quiet. He won't touch you. I won't let him. Nate. I mean it, Josie. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. I've lost everything once. I won't lose you too. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge. You won't, she said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. They rode back to the ranch in the amber light of late afternoon. Neither spoke much, but the silence was different now, charged, aware. When they dismounted at the house, Nate caught her arm. Josie. Wait. She turned. He was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the lines of exhaustion and determination etched around his mouth. Thank you, he said, for today, for standing beside me. I told you, we're in this together. I know, but I want you to understand what that means to me. His hand was still on her arm, warm through the fabric of her sleeve. 2 months ago, I was ready to let this place die, let myself die with it. And then you walked through that gate with your bleeding feet and your stubborn mouth and your refusal to give up on anything. Nate. Let me finish. His grip tightened slightly. I don't know what this is between us. Don't know if I have the right to feel it after everything. But I know that you've given me a reason to fight again. And I know that He stopped, swallowed hard. I care about you, Josie. More than I should. More than I planned to. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I care about you too. Even knowing what I am, what I've been, especially knowing. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. You're not broken, Nate. You're wounded. There's a difference. And wounds can heal. Can they? They already are. For a long moment they stood there inches apart, the evening air soft around them. Then Nate reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his calloused fingers impossibly gentle. I want to kiss you, he said quietly. I've wanted to for weeks. But I need you to know if we start this, I'm not playing games. I'm not looking for comfort or distraction. I'm looking for... He stopped. I'm looking for something real. Josie's throat was tight with emotion. So am I. Then... She didn't let him finish. She closed the distance herself, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. Two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something learning the shape of hope again. Then Nate's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Josie saw tears on his face. Nate, I'm all right. He laughed, actually laughed, watery and broken but real. I'm better than all right. I didn't think I'd ever feel this again. Neither did I. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her eyelids. We should go inside before the men see us and start making jokes. Let them. Josie. He cupped her face in his hands. When this is over, when Whitfield is dealt with and the ranch is secure, I want to do this properly. Court you. Give you the life you deserve. The life I deserve is the one I'm building right now. With you. They walked into the house hand in hand, and for the first time in 2 years, the shadows seemed a little less dark. That night, Josie lay awake in her room touching her lips where his kiss still lingered. She thought about Samuel, about a love that had started bright and turned to ash, about watching someone you cared for destroy themselves while you stood helpless. This was different. Nate wasn't destroying himself anymore. He was rebuilding, and he was asking her to be part of it. The fear was still there, it probably always would be. But underneath it, something stronger. Something that felt like the beginning of a life she'd stopped believing was possible. She fell asleep with hope in her chest for the first time in years, and didn't hear the hoofbeats on the road until it was almost too late. Josie woke to shouting. She was on her feet before she was fully conscious, grabbing Samuel's pistol from the drawer, racing down the stairs in her nightgown. Through the window, she saw torches, 4 or 5, maybe more, and men on horseback circling the house. Nate burst through the front door, rifle in hand. Stay inside. Like hell. Josie. He grabbed her arm. They're Whitfield's men. This is what he wanted to draw us out, make us do something stupid. Then what do we do? Before he could answer, a voice rang out from the darkness. Thornwood, come out and talk or we start shooting. Nate's jaw tightened. He looked at Josie, and something passed between them. Trust, determination, the shared understanding that this was the moment everything changed. Stay behind me, he said. And if anything happens, you run. You take a horse and you ride to town and you don't look back. I won't leave you. Josie. I won't. She cocked the pistol. So let's make sure nothing happens. They walked onto the porch together. 6 men on horseback, torches casting wild shadows. And at the front, not Whitfield himself but his foreman, a thick-necked man named Barlow, with a reputation for violence. Nice night for a visit, Nate said. His voice was steady, but Josie could feel the tension radiating from him. Mr. Whitfield sends his regards. Barlow's smile was ugly. He wanted me to remind you that his offer still stands. Generous terms for a quick sale. My answer hasn't changed. That's unfortunate. Barlow shifted in his saddle. Because Mr. Whitfield is getting impatient, and when he gets impatient, accidents happen. Like barn fires, like cut fences. Things happen on the frontier. Barlow's eyes found Josie, and his smile turned predatory. Especially to people who don't have enough protection. Nate stepped in front of her. Threaten her again and I'll put a bullet between your eyes. The click of 6 rifles cocking answered him. I don't think you're in a position to make threats, Thornwood. Barlow leaned forward. Mr. Whitfield wanted me to deliver a message. You've got 1 week to accept his offer. After that, well, he shrugged. Things might get complicated. He wheeled his horse and rode off into the darkness, his men following. The thunder of hoofbeats faded into the night. Nate stood motionless on the porch until the silence returned. Then his shoulders sagged and he turned to Josie. You should have stayed inside. And you should stop telling me what to do. Despite everything, he almost smiled. Fair enough. They went inside, locked the doors, checked every window. When they finally sat down at the kitchen table, the adrenaline was fading and exhaustion was setting in. 1 week, Josie said. 1 week. What are we going to do? Nate looked at her across the table. In the lamplight, his face was all shadows and determination. We're going to fight, he said, with everything we have. And if it's not enough, he reached across the table and took her hand. Then we go down together, but we don't go down without making them bleed for every inch. Josie squeezed his hand. Together then. Together. Outside, the darkness pressed against the windows. But inside, two people who'd lost everything sat hand in hand, ready to fight for the life they were building from the ashes of the old. 1 week. 7 days to save everything. Or lose it all. End Part 3. Part 4. Louis viết Vardy Man 400 liên kết liên mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liên mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liên mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liên mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Kẻ theo ngôi thứ ba giữ độ kịch tính, không viết lần mạn kết thúc phần, không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn, không nhảy sang mục document 11 Body Lum, Part 4. The first day of their week began before dawn. Josie woke to find Nate already gone from the house. She found him in the barn with Zeke, both men bent over a map spread across a hay bale. "We need to cover every approach," Nate was saying. "Night watches, rotating shifts. Nobody sleeps without someone else awake." "That's going to wear us thin," Zeke said. "4 men can't watch a property this size around the clock." "Then we focus on what matters: the house, the main barn, the water access." Nate looked up as Josie approached. "Morning. You should have woken me." "You needed sleep. We all did." He straightened, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've been thinking about Whitfield's deadline. He wants us scared and desperate, wants us making mistakes. So we don't make mistakes." "Easier said than done." Zeke folded the map. "Man like that, he's got resources we can't match. Money, men, connections. He's also got a pattern." Josie stepped closer to the 2 men. The documents Nate found, 6 families, same story. Pressure accidents, forced sales. That's not just intimidation, that's a system. And systems leave evidence. She looked at Nate. "You said you were going to contact a lawyer in Cheyenne. Did you?" "Sent a letter 2 days ago. Haven't heard back yet." "Then we need to do more than wait." Josie's mind was racing. "Those families Whitfield squeezed out, where are they now?" Nate and Zeke exchanged glances. "Scattered, I reckon," Zeke said. "Most folks don't stick around after they lose everything. But some might. And if we could find them, get them to testify about what Whitfield did." She let the implication hang. "You want to build a case against him," Nate said slowly. "I want to give him something to worry about besides us. Right now, he's got all the power. He controls the timeline, the pressure, everything. But if he knew people were talking, gathering evidence, preparing to expose him." She spread her hands. "Maybe that changes the calculation." Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Admiration, maybe. Or hope. "Zeke, ride to town. Talk to Martha Holbrook at the boarding house. She knows everyone who passes through. Ask her about the Morrison family, the Carters, anyone else who might have a grievance against Whitfield." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to Cheyenne myself. Talk to that lawyer face to face." He looked at Josie. "And I'm taking her with me." "Nate, if Whitfield finds out you've left the ranch." "Then Pike and Tommy hold down the fort until we get back. We'll be gone 2 days at most." His jaw set. "I'm done playing defense. It's time to hit back." They left within the hour. The ride to Cheyenne took most of the day. They pushed the horses hard, stopping only when necessary, eating in the saddle. Josie's legs ached and her back screamed, but she didn't complain. This was bigger than discomfort. By the time they reached the city, the sun was setting, and both of them were exhausted. The lawyer's name was Harrison Webb, a thin, sharp-eyed man who'd made his reputation defending homesteaders against land barons. He met them in his cramped office, above a general store desk, buried under papers shelves, overflowing with legal books. "Thornwood." Webb shook Nate's hand. "Got your letter. Interesting situation you've got." "Interesting is one word for it." Webb gestured for them to sit. His eyes lingered on Josie with curiosity. "And you are?" "Josephine Maddox. I work at the ranch." "She's more than that." Nate's voice was firm. "She's the reason I'm here instead of hiding in my house waiting to die." Webb's eyebrows rose, but he didn't comment. Instead, he pulled out a file and spread its contents across his desk. "I've been looking into Whitfield since I got your letter. You're right, there's a pattern. 6 properties acquired under suspicious circumstances. Fires, accidents, intimidation. All sold for well below market value. Can we prove it?" "That's the problem." Webb leaned back in his chair. "Proof requires witnesses, and most of the people Whitfield squeezed are either gone or too scared to talk." "Most," Josie said, "but not all." Webb's sharp eyes found hers. "You're quick. No, not all. I tracked down Margaret Morrison. She's living with her sister in Denver now. Her husband died last year, but before he passed, he wrote a letter detailing everything Whitfield did to them. Names, dates, specific incidents." "A letter?" Nate leaned forward. "Is that enough?" "By itself, no. But combined with other testimony, other evidence." Webb spread his hands. "It's a start. I've also been in contact with the territorial governor's office. They're aware of Whitfield's reputation, but without formal complaints, their hands are tied." "So we file a formal complaint," Josie said. "It's not that simple. Whitfield has friends, powerful friends. A complaint against him would need to be airtight, or it gets buried and you become a target." "We're already targets." Nate's voice was hard. "He burned my barn, cut my fences, sent men to threaten us in the middle of the night. What more does he have to do before someone takes action?" Webb was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't. 2 years ago, I tried to bring a case against Whitfield on behalf of another rancher. Man named Patterson. Good man. Strong case." He paused. "Patterson disappeared 3 weeks before the hearing. Never found him. Case got dismissed." The words landed like stones in still water. "You think Whitfield killed him?" Josie said. "I think Patterson was a threat, and then he wasn't. Make of that what you will." Webb met Nate's eyes. "I'm not trying to scare you off. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're dealing with. This man doesn't play by rules. He doesn't stop until he wins. Neither do I." Nate stood. "What do we need to build a case strong enough that even Whitfield's friends can't bury it?" Webb considered this. Testimony from multiple victims, documentation of the pattern, and ideally, a witness to something specific, someone willing to say under oath that they saw Whitfield or his men commit a crime. "I can testify about the barn fire," Josie said. "About the threat Barlow made." "That's something, but it's your word against theirs." Webb stood as well. "Here's what I suggest. Go back to your ranch. Keep documenting everything. I'll work on gathering testimony from the other victims. And I'll file a preliminary complaint with the territorial office, nothing public yet, just enough to get them paying attention." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe longer." "We don't have weeks." Nate's jaw was tight. "Whitfield gave us 7 days." "Then survive 7 days? After that we reassess." Webb extended his hand. "I know it's not the answer you wanted, but it's the best I can offer right now." They spent the night at a boarding house in Cheyenne. Separate rooms, propriety maintained, but Josie couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Patterson, about Whitfield, about all the ways this could go wrong. A soft knock at her door made her heart jump. "It's me." Nate's voice came through the wood. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, fully dressed, face drawn with exhaustion. "Couldn't sleep either." "No." He hesitated. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside to let him enter. They sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders almost touching neither, speaking for a long moment. "I keep thinking about Patterson," Nate said finally. "About what Webb said, that he was a threat, and then he wasn't. We're not Patterson. No, We're two people with fewer resources and more to lose. He turned to look at her. Josie, if something happens to me, don't. I need to say this. His voice was rough. If something happens, I want you to take whatever money's left and go. Start over somewhere Whitfield can't reach you. I'm not going anywhere. Josie. No. She grabbed his hand, held it tight. I didn't walk 4 days through the desert to find you just so I could run away when things got hard. I didn't spend 2 months watching you come back to life just to watch you die. Her voice cracked. I love you, Nate. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do, and I'm not losing you. The words hung between them. Josie hadn't meant to say them, hadn't even fully admitted them to herself. But they were true. As true as anything she'd ever felt. Nate's breath caught. His hand tightened on hers. Say that again. I love you. Again. I love you, Nate Thornwood. And I'm not leaving. He kissed her then. Not soft or tentative like before, but fierce, desperate, full of everything they'd both been holding back. His hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, and for a moment the fear and the danger and the impossible odds all fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nate pressed his forehead to hers. I love you too, he said. I think I have since the day you refused to leave my kitchen. That long. Longer maybe. I just didn't have the words for it. He pulled back to look at her. When this is over, and it will be over, I want to marry you. Properly. In a church with flowers and witnesses and everything you deserve. Is that a proposal? It's a promise. The proposal comes when I can do it right. He kissed her forehead. For now, just know that whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. Neither of us is. They rode back to the ranch the next morning. What they found made Josie's blood run cold. The house was still standing, but the vegetable garden she'd planted had been torn up. The chicken coop was demolished, and painted across the barn door in red letters were the words, 4 days left. Pike met them in the yard, face grim. They came last night. 15 men, maybe more. We couldn't stop them. Anyone hurt? Tommy caught a fist to the jaw when he tried to chase them off. Nothing serious. Pike's scar stood out white against his anger. But boss, they were making a point. They could have burned the whole place. They chose not to. They want us scared, Josie said. Are you? She looked at the destroyed garden, the ruined coop, the hateful words on the barn. Everything she'd worked to build, vandalized in a single night. No, she said. I'm angry. The next 3 days were a siege. They worked in shifts, 2 people awake at all times while the others slept. Josie learned to load and fire the rifles Nate kept in the house. She learned to recognize the sound of approaching hoofbeats, to tell the difference between wind and footsteps, to sleep with one eye open. On the 5th day, help came from an unexpected source. Martha Holbrook arrived at the ranch in a borrowed wagon, accompanied by 2 men Josie didn't recognize. This is James Carter, Martha said, gesturing to the older of the 2. His family lost their ranch to Whitfield 8 years ago. Carter was weathered and worn with the look of a man who'd been beaten down by life, but his eyes were clear and determined. I heard what you're doing, he said to Nate. Standing up to that bastard. I wish I'd had the guts to do the same. What happened to you? Same as the others. Fires, dead cattle. My wife got so scared she couldn't sleep. We had 3 kids, couldn't risk them getting hurt. His jaw tightened. We sold for $200. Land was worth $5,000. And you're willing to testify. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to see that man answer for what he did. Carter looked around the damaged ranch. I've been running from this for 8 years. Time to stop running. The other man was younger, barely 30, with nervous eyes and twitching hands. Edgar Whitfield, Martha said. Cornelius's son. Josie's hand went to the pistol at her hip. Nate stepped forward, putting himself between Edgar and the house. What the hell is he doing here? Easy. Martha raised her hands. He's here to help. Help! Nate's voice was pure ice. His father burned my barn, threatened my people, painted death threats on my property. I know. Edgar's voice was barely above a whisper. I know what he's done. What he's been doing for years. He swallowed hard. I'm here because I can't live with it anymore. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything. The young man met Nate's eyes, and Josie saw something there. Shame, desperation, the look of someone at the end of their rope. My father is a monster. I've known it since I was a boy. But I was too weak to stop him. Too scared of what he'd do to me. So what changed? I heard about you. About what you're doing. About the widow who stood up to him when everyone else ran. Edgar's gaze found Josie's, and I realized that if two people who've lost everything can fight back, I don't have any excuse left. What can you offer us? Edgar reached into his coat and pulled out a leather satchel. Records. Ledgers. My father's own handwriting documenting payments to the men who burned properties, cut fences, rustled cattle, names, dates, amounts. He held out the satchel with trembling hands. Everything you need to put him in prison. Nate didn't move. Josie could see the war on his face. Distrust fighting with hope. Caution fighting with the desperate need for an advantage. Why should we trust you? You shouldn't. Edgar's voice cracked. I've done nothing to earn trust. But those documents are real. Check them. Verify them. Have your lawyer examine every page. His hand dropped to his side. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to do one right thing before I destroy myself the way my father destroyed everyone else. The silence stretched. Then Josie stepped forward and took the satchel from Edgar's hands. Josie, Nate started, if these documents are what he says they are, they change everything. She met his eyes. We can afford to verify before we trust. Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Pike. Take Mr. Whitfield to the bunkhouse. Keep him comfortable, but keep him contained. He doesn't leave until we know what we're dealing with. Edgar went without protest. When he was gone, Josie opened the satchel and spread its contents on the kitchen table. Ledgers, letters, payment records. Names she recognized Barlow, others who worked for Whitfield, connected to specific incidents with specific dates. My God, Martha breathed. This is everything. Nate's voice was hoarse. This is everything. They spent the night going through the documents, cross-referencing dates with known incidents, matching payments to destruction, building a case that even Whitfield's connections couldn't dismiss. By dawn, Josie's eyes burned and her hands shook, but she'd never felt more alive. We have to get this to Webb, she said. Immediately. I'll ride to Cheyenne myself. Nate gathered the documents carefully. If Whitfield finds out what his son did, he'll be coming. Martha's face was pale. When Edgar doesn't come home, Cord will know something's wrong. Then we need to be ready. The 6th day dawned gray and cold. Nate left for Cheyenne at first light with the documents secured in his saddlebags. Josie stood on the porch and watched him ride away, fear clawing at her chest. He'll be back, Martha said, standing beside her. I know. You love him. I do. Good. The older woman squeezed her hand. After everything you've both been through, you deserve that. The afternoon brought a letter from Webb. The territorial governor's office had agreed to open a formal investigation into Whitfield's land acquisitions. They were sending a representative to take testimony. Hope bloomed in Josie's chest. They were winning. Against all odds, they were actually winning. Then the gunshots started. Josie grabbed her pistol and ran outside. Pike and Tommy were already in the yard, weapons drawn, facing the road where a group of riders was approaching at a gallop. Barlow led them. 20 men, maybe more, all armed. Where's Thornwood? Barlow shouted. Not here. That's unfortunate. Barlow's smile was ugly. Because Mr. Whitfield would like a word. And if Thornwood's not available, well... His eyes found Josie. I reckon you'll do. You take one step closer, and I'll put a bullet in you. Josie's voice didn't waver. Her hands didn't shake. Your boss is finished. We have the documents. The governor's office is investigating. Something flickered across Barlow's face. Doubt, fear. You're bluffing. Am I? Ask Edgar. He's the one who gave us everything. That landed. Barlow's expression shifted, uncertainty replacing confidence. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. Mr. Whitfield has friends who can make investigations disappear. Not this time. Josie stepped forward. This time, there are too many witnesses, too many documents, too much evidence that even his friends can't bury. She met Barlow's eyes. It's over. You can ride away now and maybe survive what's coming. Or you can stay and go down with him. The standoff held. 20 men against 4 guns trained on each other, the fate of everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then from behind Barlow's men came the sound of more hoofbeats. Nate appeared over the ridge, but he wasn't alone. A dozen riders flanked him, and at their head rode a man in a territorial marshal's uniform. Barlow, the marshal shouted. You and your men are under arrest. Lay down your weapons. For a moment, Josie thought Barlow would fight. His hand twitched toward his gun. His jaw clenched with fury. Then his shoulders sagged. Stand down, he told his men. It's over. The arrests took hours. By the time the last of Whitfield's men was in custody, the sun was setting, and Josie's legs would barely hold her. She sat on the porch steps, too exhausted to move, and watched Nate cross the yard toward her. He sat down beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. It's done, he said. Webb met me on the road with the marshal. They'd already mobilized based on Edgar's documents. Whitfield is in custody. The investigation is proceeding. It's really over. Not completely. There'll be trials, testimony. It might take months. He took her hand. But yes, it's over. Josie leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. What happens now? Now. He kissed the top of her head. Now we rebuild. The ranch, our lives, everything. Together. Together. He pulled something from his pocket, a simple gold ring, worn and ancient. This was my grandmother's. My mother gave it to me before she died, said to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with. He held it up in the fading light. I know I said I'd propose properly, but I can't wait anymore. Josie Maddox, will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit like it had been waiting for her all along. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. He pulled her close. And I'm never letting you go. End Part 4. Part 5. Louis Viet 3500-4502 liên kết liên mật với các phân trước trong câu chuyện pha hối thoại, tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi mô tả cảnh ít tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ độ kịch tính không viết lan mạn. Kết thúc dùng câu khẳng định mạnh để khép lại câu chuyện rõ ràng. Trọn vẹn. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mục document 12/22. Thai. Part 5. The trial of Cornelius Whitfield began 6 weeks after his arrest. Josie sat in the territorial courthouse in Cheyenne, Nate's hand wrapped around hers, and watched the man who had tried to destroy them finally face justice. Whitfield looked smaller, somehow diminished, without his army of hired men and his carefully cultivated power. His cold blue eyes swept the courtroom, landing on Josie with pure hatred. She didn't flinch. She'd stopped flinching months ago. One by one, the witnesses testified. James Carter spoke about losing his family ranch. Margaret Morrison's letter was read aloud, her dead husband's words echoing through the silent courtroom. Edgar Whitfield took the stand and detailed his father's crimes with the hollow voice of a man who had finally stopped running from the truth. When Josie's turn came, she walked to the witness chair with her head high. "Mrs. Maddox," the prosecutor said, "can you describe what happened on the night of September 15th? Whitfield's men came to the ranch." Her voice was steady. 20 of them, led by his foreman Barlow. They threatened us, said we had 4 days to sell or face consequences. "And did you feel your life was in danger?" "Yes." She looked directly at Whitfield. "But I wasn't going to run. I'd done enough running." The courtroom was silent as she continued. She told them about the barn fire, the cut fences, the destroyed garden, about the painted threat on the barn door, about standing on that porch with a pistol in her hand, facing down men who'd come to terrorize them. "Why didn't you leave?" the prosecutor asked. "By all accounts, you had every reason to. You'd already lost everything once before." Josie was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Nate sitting in the gallery with his dark eyes fixed on her face. "Because some things are worth fighting for," she said. "Even when you're scared. Even when everyone tells you it's hopeless. I found something on that ranch I didn't know I was looking for. A home, a purpose, someone worth standing beside." Her voice softened. "I wasn't going to let fear take that from me. Not again." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, fraud, arson, intimidation. The judge sentenced Whitfield to 15 years in the territorial prison, and as they led him away in chains, Josie felt something release in her chest that she'd been carrying since the day she first saw him ride up to the ranch. It was over. Really, truly over. Outside the courthouse, Nate pulled her into his arms. "You were incredible," he said against her hair. "The way you looked at him. The way you didn't back down. I learned from the best." He laughed, that rusty, unpracticed sound that had become more familiar over the past months. "I'm pretty sure you were brave long before you met me." "Maybe." She pulled back to look at him. "But you gave me something to be brave for." They were married 3 weeks later. It was a small ceremony held in the parlor of the ranch house that Josie had scrubbed back to life. Martha Holbrook stood as witness. Zeke Pike and Tommy wore their cleanest clothes and tried not to look too emotional. Even Edgar Whitfield came still haunted, but healing, grateful to be part of something good after so many years of darkness. Josie wore a simple cream-colored dress she'd sewn herself. Nothing fancy, nothing elaborate. But Nate looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Josephine Maddox," the preacher said, "do you take this man to be your husband?" "I do." The words came out strong, sure, without a trace of hesitation. "Nathaniel Thornwood, do you take this woman to be your wife?" "I do." Nate's voice cracked slightly. His eyes were wet. "Now and forever." When they kissed, the small gathering erupted in cheers. Tommy threw his hat in the air. Zeke wiped his eyes with a bandana. Martha sobbed openly and didn't care who saw. Josie held on to Nate like she'd never let go, and for the first time in years, the future felt like a promise instead of a threat. That night, alone in the house, they'd fought so hard to keep Nate led her upstairs. Not to her old room, not to his, to the locked door at the end of the hall. Josie's breath caught. "Nate, I want to show you something." His voice was soft. "Something I should have shown you a long time ago." He pulled out a key and opened the door. The nursery was exactly as Amelia had left it. Walls painted with clouds and birds. A rocking chair by the window. A cradle carved with intricate detail waiting for a child who would never sleep in it. Josie felt tears sting her eyes. "It's beautiful." She painted that mural herself. Nate walked to the wall, touched the painted birds with gentle fingers. "Said she wanted our daughter to wake up every morning seeing the sky." His voice roughened. "I couldn't come in here after they died. Couldn't bear to look at all this hope turned into a monument to what I'd lost. Why now?" He turned to face her. "Because I'm ready. Because you taught me that keeping things locked away doesn't protect you from the pain. It just keeps you from moving forward. He reached for her hand. I don't want to forget them. I don't want to pretend they never existed, but I also don't want to live in their shadows anymore. What do you want? I want to fill this house with life again, with laughter and noise and children and all the things Amelia dreamed about. He pulled her closer. I want to build a future with you, Josie. One that honors what I had before, but isn't trapped by it. That's what I want too. Then let's start. He kissed her forehead. Together. They stood in the nursery as the moonlight spilled through the windows, two people who had lost everything learning how to hope again. The months that followed were the happiest of Josie's life. The ranch thrived under their combined management. Nate hired more hands. They expanded the herd. The house that had been a tomb became a home filled with warmth and laughter and the comfortable chaos of a life being built. Josie planted a new garden to replace the one Whitfield's men had destroyed. She organized the household accounts with the same stubborn efficiency she'd brought to everything else. And slowly, carefully, she and Nate began talking about the future. I've been thinking, she said one morning over breakfast, about the nursery. Nate looked up from his coffee. What about it? It's been sitting empty, and I know it holds memories for you, but, she hesitated. I thought maybe we could start making new memories there. His eyes searched her face. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I'd like to have a baby. Her voice was soft but steady. If you're ready. If you want that. For a moment, Nate didn't speak. Then he came around the table, and pulled her into his arms. I want that more than anything, he said against her hair. I was afraid to hope for it. Afraid that wanting something so much would jinx it somehow. We're done being afraid, remember? He laughed, that warm sound she'd come to love. You're right. We are. The baby came the following autumn. Josie labored for 12 hours while Nate paced the hallway, terrified out of his mind. Martha served as midwife, her calm voice and steady hands guiding them through the longest night of their lives. When the first cry finally split the air, Nate burst into the room to find Josie exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny squalling bundle. It's a girl? Martha said, wiping her eyes. A beautiful, healthy girl. Nate approached the bed like a man in a dream. Josie held out the baby, and when he took her in his arms, something in his face cracked open. All the grief, all the fear, all the years of believing he'd never have this again. It all dissolved in the face of this tiny, perfect miracle. She's beautiful, he whispered. She's so beautiful. She has your eyes. Josie smiled up at him. What should we name her? Nate was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Josie with tears streaming down his face. Hope, he said. I want to name her Hope. Josie's throat tightened. She understood what he was saying, what he was honoring. A daughter named for the thing they'd both almost lost. The thing they'd found in each other. Hope Thornwood, she said. It's perfect. The years passed like water through their fingers. Hope grew from a squalling infant into a fierce, determined toddler who had her father's stubbornness and her mother's sharp tongue. 2 years after Hope came a son, Thomas, named for the man Josie had lost, reclaiming the name from tragedy and giving it new meaning. The ranch expanded, the house filled with noise and chaos and joy. Zeke taught the children to ride. Pike told them stories by the fire. Tommy, who'd found a wife of his own by then, brought his children over on Sundays for dinner. The dining room table that had once sat empty now overflowed with family. On the 10th anniversary of the day, Josie had walked through those iron gates. She stood on the porch watching the sunset, while Nate came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? The day I arrived. She leaned back against him. I was so broken, so scared. I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again. And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. He turned her around to face him. At 40, he was more handsome than the haunted man she'd met a decade ago. The lines around his eyes came from laughter now instead of grief. The gray in his hair only made him more distinguished. I have something for you, he said. An anniversary gift. Nate, you didn't have to. I wanted to. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Open it. Inside was a ring. Not the simple gold band his grandmother had given him, which she still wore every day. This was different silver set with a small blue stone that caught the fading light. It's beautiful, she breathed. I had it made special. The stone is from that hill where Amelia and Lily are buried. His voice was rough with emotion. I wanted something that honored all of it. The past and the present. Everything we lost and everything we found. Tears streamed down Josie's face. I love it. I love you. I love you too. Every stubborn, fierce, beautiful part of you. He slipped the ring onto her finger next to the wedding band she'd worn for 10 years. Thank you, Josie. For what? For everything. For not giving up on this place. For not giving up on me. For giving me hope and Thomas and this life I never thought I'd have again. He cupped her face in his hands. You saved me. You know that, right? We saved each other. She rose on her toes to kiss him. That's how it works. From inside the house came the sound of children shrieking, followed by Tommy's patient voice trying to restore order. Zeke's laughter echoed from the kitchen. The smell of dinner drifted through the open windows. Life. Loud, messy, beautiful life. Come on, Nate said, taking her hand. Our family's waiting. They walked inside together into the house that had once been a tomb and was now a home, and Josie felt gratitude so deep it nearly brought her to her knees. 20 years later, Josie stood in that same spot on the porch and watched her grandchildren playing in the yard. Hope had grown into a formidable woman, married now with children of her own. Thomas ran the ranch alongside his father, already showing the same steady leadership that had always defined Nate. The property had tripled in size. The Thornwood name was respected throughout the territory. Nate came out to join her, moving slower now, but still strong. Still the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything. She took his hand. The day I arrived. The fires. Whitfield. All the times I thought we wouldn't survive. But we did. We did. She looked at the children at the house, at the life they'd built from the ashes of everything they'd lost. You know what I remember most about that first day? What? The gate. Standing outside that iron gate, trying to decide if I was brave enough to walk through. She smiled. I almost didn't. Almost turned around and walked away. I'm glad you didn't. Me too. She leaned against him, feeling his arm come around her shoulders, solid and warm and sure. It was the job nobody wanted, and it turned out to be everything I needed. Nate kissed her temple. You turned out to be everything I needed. They stood together in the golden afternoon light, watching their grandchildren play, listening to the sounds of family drifting from the house behind them. The iron gate still stood at the end of the road, though it had been repainted and repaired countless times over the years. Sometimes Josie walked down to look at it, remembering the woman who'd passed through it with bleeding feet and a carpet bag, and nothing but stubbornness keeping her alive. That woman felt like a stranger now, and also like an old friend. She'd come here to survive. She'd found so much more. A home, a family, a love that had healed them both, and a life that proved something she'd stopped believing was possible, that broken people could become whole again, that grief could transform into joy, that the hardest journeys led to the most beautiful destinations. The sun set over the Wyoming mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Josie Thornwood closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of home. She had taken the job nobody wanted and found everything worth living for.